We are looking at the four basic strain types of cannabis, um, and that there's indica, sativa, hybrids, and then there's this thing called ruderalis. And so I'm going to quickly tell you what they mean and then tell you that it's also meaningless. Okay, so the indicas are, first of all, the term indica originally came from cannabis that was imported from India. And that was all it meant. It was a location term. Since then, indica sativa has come to mean two types of landrace or heirloom strains of cannabis that come from two distinct parts of the world. Indicas are primarily northern hemisphere, high altitude or high latitude, and sativas are primarily equatorial. They have much longer growing periods. Everything that exists now, however, is a hybrid. These plants have been combined and selectively breeded over time to, I'm just going to switch headphones here because I'm running low on the battery in this one. Over time, we've selectively breeded this plant to produce the most amount of THC in the shortest amount of time possible, in the smallest amount of space possible. So what's out there right now in the genetic gene pool of cannabis is pretty diluted and homogeneous. It's primarily all high THC and missing a lot of minor cannabinoids that is present in some of these landrace strains. Now, there are some people that grow these landrace strains still. They're harder to grow, they take longer, they don't yield as much, they're just not popular. But there's a movement now in the cannabis industry. I was really excited to see it. So my presentation, my post-presentation to this cannabis convention, it was interesting that I was sort of surprised they selected me because there were companies like Philip Morris were there and other very large-scale industrial entities. And here I was, I'm saying, I'm a clinician, and I've noticed that prohibition has created this problem where all we have is high THC cannabis and generally relatively little knowledge of how and the different ways of using and dosing it, that we have this general concept of to use cannabis means to inhale it to get high, even though that's mostly not how it was used for most of history. So it's really funny. And so what I find is that people tell me cannabis isn't that helpful for their condition, that's how they're primarily using it. They're just smoking large doses. And when we get them on other routes of administration at lower doses that are pointed at their medical condition, they improve greatly. And then they can still enjoy it recreationally if they want, because they're using it in a very different way medically that has very different effects. But I get a little ahead of myself there. Sativas are thought to be more stimulating, indicas are thought to be more sedating. And so that's how things are marketed. You'll see, oh, this is an indica, this is a sativa. All they're trying to tell you is this is maybe going to be more sedating, and this is going to be maybe more stimulating. And the hybrid is going to be kind of something in between. But what actually matters is how you feel inside. So let's say you're incredibly well rested and you have a small amount of cannabis. That's probably going to end up having a more stimulating effect. Let's say you're really sleep deprived and you have a small amount of cannabis. That's probably going to end up making you really sleepy. So it's funny. There certainly are some strains that have more stimulating versus sedating effects. It is a thing. It's just that it's really hard to quantify and so what's more helpful for people to understand is not whether or not they need indica or sativa, but how does the cannabis I like smell? How does it taste? Those are actually the mediators for the different effects. Besides the ratio of THC to CBD, what mediates the different effects is the terpene content, and that's what gives it its flavor and smell. So all these things combined together equal cannabis as a medicine. Okay, so we've been talking about the individual parts, but put all together, it ends up equaling cannabis as medicine. Cannabinoids are medicine too. It's just that their usage and dosage is going to be different, and their effects are going to be different. So that's the overall thing I want you to understand there. Um, there are different modes of ingestion. That's all. So there's oral, the inhaled method that generally, smoking or vaporized or an inhalation. That's the most commonly known method. Immediate effect, high bioavailability, but there's of course risks to the lungs that way. And it's a shorter duration of action. So if you're treating pain with inhaled cannabis, that means using it many times a day. Oral cannabis, however, can last up to 6 to 8 hours, but can have this greatly delayed reaction. And so anybody starting an oral cannabis needs to start at a low dose and be very patient, because it may have a long onset and then you're stuck with that feeling for 6 to 8 hours. Now, if you can get this to work for you, this is probably one of the best ways to use cannabis as a medicine, because again, it's not associated with smoking, doesn't have a lot of stigma, but also you get a longer duration of action. You don't have to use it as many times, especially for pain. There are topicals as well for skin conditions, pain that's close to the surface, superficial pain, and even some small nerve pain. Rub it on the skin and it works incredibly well. It's almost instant activity. The first time I tried some on my neck, I was actually angry. It's like, wow, how is this not legal? There's no high, and it is incredibly effective. There are transdermal patches out there that work as well, that can be more systemic, but in general, the topicals aren't systemic. You won't get high from it because cannabinoids are lipids, they're oils, and they just we're made of water, so they don't dissolve into us very well. There are ways to make cannabinoids water soluble. That's rather newish, and that is happening. And there are topicals out there that are systemic. So you need to be really wary of that. Just make sure you know what kind of, if it's a nano encapsulation or if it's water soluble. Same thing with sublingual. This general is just oral dosing, but it comes on faster because it's in liquid form. But it can be easily titrated. But if it's a real sublingual, it might be based in alcohol or something else that gets absorbed through the oral mucosal glands. But in general, they're edible oils, MCT oil, coconut oil, things like that. All right. This is what it all looks like. This is the flower. This is what hash looks like. These are all the inhaled forms. Here's RSO is a little different. So these things are used for dabs. You guys may have heard of that. These are it's very concentrated form of cannabis used to extract in different ways. And so like this form that comes in the vape pens, it's not so much CO2 anymore. That's actually pretty unusual. It's most commonly what's called distillate, which is just THC distilled. I'm not a big fan of those. They're okay and helpful for some things. Somebody asked about vape pens earlier. Problem with vape pens is the vapor that comes out, the content there, doesn't always match what goes into it. And that's got everything to do with the heating element and the temperature it heats to. And so CBD, for example, needs a much higher heating temperature. If your vape card is calibrated for THC, then it's not even going to really work that well. And there's all sorts of other issues with vape pens and distillate, but these things are more full spectrum. So the shatter, wax, butter, what have you, live resin, those things are full cannabinoid profile and can be very effective medicines at much lower doses than using the whole plant material. This thing called RSO, almost nobody smokes RSO. That's a Rick Simpson oil. It's a form of concentrate that is most often orally taken, created by this guy, Rick Simpson, or at least not created, but named after him. He got skin cancer in his face. He went to the doctor and they're like, you need chemoradiation. He's like, what about cannabis? They're like, what are you talking about? This is like late 70s, early 80s. He's like, I heard it can help. They're like, you have cancer in your face. We'd like to give you chemoradiation. Can we schedule you an appointment? He's like, nah. What about the oils of cannabis? They're like, no, sir, please come in and get your treatment. He says, eh. So against all medical advice, this man, I can't speak to his mental capacities, goes home, takes some cannabis, cooks it down in some alcohol, rubs the sludge on his face, and puts the Band-Aid on. 2 weeks later, his tumor's gone. And he goes to the doctor, says, hey, look at this. The doctor's like, oh, cool, where'd you get your treatment? He's like, no, I rubbed the cannabis oil on it. He's like, get out of my office. And he got another tumor and he did it again, and it worked. And he started making the stuff and giving it to whoever would come see him to get it. So there's a great documentary.